What is the heat transfer coefficient? The heat transfer coefficient, H, is a measure of the effectiveness of a fluid in transferring heat by convection. It is defined as the ratio of the heat flux to the temperature difference between the solid surface and the fluid. H is equal to Q, T's, Tf. Where Q is the heat flux, T's is the temperature of the solid surface, and Tf is the temperature of the fluid. What is thermal conductivity? Thermal conductivity, K, is a measure of a material's ability to conduct heat. It is defined as the rate at which heat is conducted through a unit area of a material per unit temperature difference. Q is equal to kT. Where Q is the heat flux, A is the cross-sectional area, and T is the temperature gradient. What is the heat transfer rate? The heat transfer rate, Q, is the amount of heat transferred per unit time. It is typically expressed in watts, W, or British thermal units per hour, BTU/HR. What is the thermal resistance? Thermal resistance, R, is a measure of a material's resistance to heat flow. It is defined as the temperature difference per unit heat flux. R is equal to delta TQ, where delta T is the temperature difference and Q is the heat flux. What is thermal boundary layer? A thermal boundary layer is a thin layer of fluid adjacent to a solid surface that experiences a significant temperature gradient due to heat transfer by conduction and convection. The thickness of the thermal boundary layer is typically characterized by the local Nusselt number. What is convective heat transfer coefficient? The convective heat transfer coefficient, H, is a measure of the effectiveness of a fluid in transferring heat by convection. It is defined as the ratio of the heat flux to the temperature difference between the solid surface and the fluid. H is equal to Q, T's, Tf. Where Q is the heat flux, T's is the temperature of the solid surface, and Tf is the temperature of the fluid. What is the Stefan-Boltzmann law? The Stefan-Boltzmann law states that the total emissive power of a black body is proportional to the fourth power of its absolute temperature. The law is given by E is equal to sigma T4, where E is the emissive power, sigma is the Stefan-Boltzmann constant, and T is the absolute temperature. What is emissivity? Emissivity is a measure of the ability of a material to emit thermal radiation. It is defined as the ratio of the emissive power of a material to the emissive power of a black body at the same temperature. What is the Piclet number? The Piclet number, P, is a dimensionless number that is used to characterize the relative importance of convection and diffusion in a fluid. It is defined as the product of the characteristic length scale, the characteristic velocity scale, and the diffusivity, divided by the thermal conductivity. P is equal to UL alpha, where U is the characteristic velocity scale, L is the characteristic length scale, alpha is the diffusivity, and kappa is the thermal conductivity. What is the Fourier number? The Fourier number, Φ, is a dimensionless number that is used to characterize the transient heat conduction process. It is defined as the ratio of the thermal diffusivity to the square of the characteristic length scale multiplied by the time. Φ is equal to alpha T L2, where alpha is the thermal diffusivity, L is the characteristic length scale, and T is the time. What is the Biot number? The Biot number, Bi, is a dimensionless number that is used to characterize the relative importance of conduction and convection in a solid. It is defined as the ratio of the internal thermal resistance to the external thermal resistance. Bi is equal to HLK, where H is the convective heat transfer coefficient, L is the characteristic length scale, and K is the thermal conductivity. What is a heat exchanger? A heat exchanger is a device that is used to transfer heat from one fluid to another. It typically consists of a series of tubes or channels that allow the fluids to flow in close proximity, allowing for efficient heat transfer. What are the types of heat exchangers? There are several types of heat exchangers, including shell and tube heat exchangers, plate heat exchangers, finned tube heat exchangers, direct contact heat exchangers. What is a shell and tube heat exchanger? A shell and tube heat exchanger is a type of heat exchanger that consists of a shell, a cylindrical vessel, with a bundle of tubes inside. One fluid flows through the tubes, while the other flows around the tubes in the shell. What is a plate heat exchanger? A plate heat exchanger is a type of heat exchanger that consists of a series of thin plates with alternating channels. One fluid flows through the odd-numbered channels, while the other flows through the even-numbered channels, allowing for efficient heat transfer. What is a finned tube heat exchanger? A finned tube heat exchanger is a type of heat exchanger that consists of tubes with fins attached to the outside. The fins increase the surface area of the tubes, allowing for more efficient heat transfer. 92. What is a direct contact heat exchanger? A direct contact heat exchanger is a type of heat exchanger in which the two fluids come into direct contact with each other, allowing for efficient heat transfer through mixing. What is a heat sink? A heat sink is a device that is used to dissipate heat from electronic components by transferring it to a surrounding medium, typically air or water. What is thermal insulation? Thermal insulation is the process of reducing heat transfer between objects by using materials with low thermal conductivity. This is commonly used to reduce heat loss from buildings or to prevent heat transfer between different components of a system. What is the heat transfer coefficient for natural convection? The heat transfer coefficient for natural convection is given by H is equal to KL GRPR 0.25, where K is the thermal conductivity, L is the characteristic length scale, GR is the Grashof number, and PR is the Prandtl number. What is the heat transfer coefficient for forced convection? The heat transfer coefficient for forced convection is given by H is equal to Nusselt number X KL, where Nusselt number is a dimensionless number that depends on the fluid flow and geometry of the system, K is the thermal conductivity, and L is the characteristic length scale. What is the convective heat transfer coefficient for a flat plate? The convective heat transfer coefficient for a flat plate is given by H is equal to 0.664 GRX 1 plus 0.492 PR 9/16 a quarter asterisk K kiss smiley, where GRX is the local Grashof number, PR is the Prandtl number, K is the thermal conductivity, and X is the distance from the leading edge of the plate. What is the Reynolds number for flow past a cylinder? The Reynolds number for flow past a cylinder is given by Re is equal to UD nu, where U is the free stream velocity, D is the diameter of the cylinder, and nu is the kinematic viscosity. What is the Nusselt number for flow past a cylinder? The Nusselt number for flow past a cylinder is given by nu is equal to HdK, where H is the convective heat transfer coefficient, D is the diameter of the cylinder, and K is the thermal conductivity.